G'day and welcome to Inside Rugby. My name is Mark. I'm a Kiwi rugby fan that's living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico, and in this video we're going to have a closer look at that game that was played today between the Springboks and Scotland in Marseille. Anticipation was high around this game. A lot of people thought that Scotland had a very good chance in taking the Springboks down, but I guess many more people thought that the Springboks' power in the forwards was going to be too much for Scotland in this game. So let's have a look at how the game unfolded, starting from before the players even ran out onto the field. And what I truly love about the South African team is the unity and the passion they have. And before the players even got out onto the field to play today, Khaleesi was leading them in a sing-along in the tunnel under the stadium. And if you saw that on the television before the game got underway, you would see how much passion there is in the Springboks team, led by their legendary captain Siya Kolisi, and I absolutely love that. If you compare that to some of the other teams we've seen, I've always talked about how the New Zealand haka is losing its emphasis in World Rugby, and also the passion of the national anthems being sung. So for me, that was a really strong point for the Springboks, that they'd turned up to play in this game. They were ready to go, and that's exactly a very notable milestone in this game. Was Faf de Klerk, the halfback for the Springboks, was celebrating his 50th cap for the team, and Siya Kolisi and his team members let him come out onto the field before the rest of the Springboks team. And at 50 caps, that puts Faf de Klerk third in line with the most caps of Springboks halfbacks in the history of the game. So as I say, the game got underway and the Springboks were right on the front foot from the start, and they showed their intent that they wanted to play an expansive and fast game against this Scottish team. The Springboks started getting a lot of possession straight out of the gate, and Lebok started putting up some tough kicks for Kinghorn at the back for South Africa to contend with. Very good strategy. It put the Springboks on the front foot, but it also set up their strength in the set pieces. So whether the ball went for a line out or for a scrum, the Springboks were able to already test out the Scottish team. Now in the 9th minute, a scrum penalty went to South Africa, and they had an opportunity for Lebok to come up and have his first kick at goal, and unfortunately he missed that. Now of course we've been talking a lot, I've been talking a lot in my videos about the importance of Manny Lebok in this team and his goal kicking, and the fact that he's going to have a high percentage of goal kicking to help South Africa go through this Rugby World Cup tournament. So missing that first kick probably didn't instill too much confidence in Lebok at the beginning of this game. But Lebok only had to wait 3 more minutes until he got a second chance after a deliberate knock-on from Finn Russell as the South Africans were spinning the ball wide. Russell put his hand out, and it was an intentional knock-on, and he got a penalty awarded against him. Lebok stood up this time and kicked the goal. So the Springboks went ahead 3 points to 0 at that stage. First 20 minutes of this game, a couple of things became apparent for me. The Springboks were playing at pace. They were also very good at clearing out from their line. So when the 2 times they did get down near their 22, they were very good at getting the ball away, both from Faf de Klerk and also from Lebok. The Scottish had a couple of problems in the line out in that first 20 minutes, overthrowing the ball, and that put pressure on the Scottish as the South Africans picked up the crumbs from those overthrows at the line out. So in the first 20 minutes, I thought South Africa got the better of the Scottish team, and we went into the first water break, which is now mandatory during these hot periods of play at the Rugby World Cup. Someone did ask me what I think of these water breaks in the Rugby World Cup, and yeah, I guess there's 2 sides to it. The first one is a safety issue and making sure that we're not getting players in danger from overheating, and that needs to be apparent, I guess. But the second one is it does create an advantage for one team or the other. If a team's got a lot of momentum going, having a break for a few minutes does give the opposition time to respond, and I think that's a little bit of a negative thing. But hopefully the weather's going to get cooler in the coming days, and we're not going to have these water breaks. So after that first water break in the first half, the biggest issue with for the Scottish was the South Africans were taking away a lot of their time with the ball. So when they did get ball in possession, the Springboks defence was up tight on the Scottish team, and they were putting a lot of pressure on them, and as a result of that they weren't able to really make any line breaks, and they were doing a lot of their controlling of the ball across the field rather than really making headroads into the South African defence line, and that was something that was very apparent in that first period of play. And it was in the 24th minute where we saw Scotland infringing again around the ruck, and a penalty ensued to South Africa. Lebok got the next penalty over, so South Africa after 24 minutes went up 6 points to 0. 1 minute after that we saw Eben Etzebeth go off with a shoulder injury, it's suspected, and RG Snyman came on the field. So nothing lost there really for South Africa as the big Viking came on to make his presence felt in the South African pack. And then just after Etzebeth had gone on, there was a passage of play where South Africa had the ball and moving forward on attack, and Kurt Lee Arendse was tackled by Finn Russell, who put a shoulder into him and seemed to get injured in the rib area of that stage. So Finn Russell went down for a few minutes with a bit of a rib looking injury. And for the next 4 or 5 minutes of the game we saw the South Africans starting to increase the pressure on the Scottish defence, putting a few waves of attack together, and I felt though the Scottish defence was just hanging on at that stage. I think the South Africans could have broken through at any time to score a try, but good work by the Scottish defence. They were there in numbers and they were up fast on the South Africans in a couple of instances, almost stopping tries. Zealander for South Africa was big in the middle, doing some really good runs forward on the back of some really good forward charges as well. Jasper Wiese being one of those who was carrying the ball up, along with Peter Steph de Toy, was doing very good work in the clean out. Kalesi was huge as well, taking up a lot of plays towards the Scottish line and getting the ball back quickly for Faf de Klerk to distribute to Manie Lebok and onto the back line. Then in the last couple of minutes of the first half we saw 2 really big plays, and Scotland won 2 scrum penalties at that stage, and a lot of the Scottish crowd erupted as they saw some dominance coming from the Scottish forwards against the South Africans, something we probably weren't expecting to see happen in this particular game. But just in that last 5 minutes of the first half, the Scottish scrum was working very well. Right on half time, Finn Russell got a penalty attempt from one of those scrum penalties, and from a long range distance he put the kick over. So we went to half time at 6 points to 3, and it was really game on at this stage. It was shaping up to be a really good game in that first half. There was a lot of expansive play. Both teams came to play, and if you'd watched the Argentina versus England game yesterday, you're probably a lot happier seeing this type of game unfold, even though a lot of people in the comments of my England-Argentina review video will say that England played a strategically very sound game against Argentina. I won't argue with that. A win's a win as far as the Rugby World Cup goes. But I was very happy with this game in terms of the first half. I think both teams went out with the intention to test the other team out. There was some open play, there was a lot of breaks in the game as well, and there was some mighty forward play, and I thought that this was going to be the telling point in the second half, particularly in the heat in Marseille. Were the Scottish team going to be able to stay with the Springboks as they headed into the second half, particularly in the forward? At half time, I think Gregor Townsend probably would have been pleased with the Scottish team, although some of the handling errors let them down a little bit in terms of trying to make some breaks. I think he would have been talking to Finn Russell to try and find ways to crack open this South African defence, and probably talking about doing a few chips over the top of the defensive line to get the ball back in behind the South African defence. I think that's one of the things that Gregor Townsend probably had a mention to Finn Russell about at half time. For the rest of it though, I think the Scottish forwards could be fairly proud that they held the South Africans to 6-3 at half time, and it was all going to come down to, I thought, that last 20 minutes of this game to see how the Scottish team were going to be able to hang on in the heat in Marseille. So the second half got underway and we were just a couple of minutes in and we saw a huge scrum from South Africa, and I guess this was the writing on the wall for the second half, because they had obviously had a look at half time at what the Scottish were doing in the scrums, and leaving no stone unturned, they came out and created a fantastic scrum platform. A few minutes later the South Africans went on attack, and RG Snyman, the Viking, did a fantastic one-handed pass over the top to Malcolm Marx and set the South Africans onto the attack down the right-hand side of the field. They quickly got the ball out and kept putting pressure on the Scottish team across the 22. And as the ball went wide out to the left, it was a couple of forwards that got together and drove towards the line, and Peter Steph du Toit ended up going over and scoring the try in the 47th minute. It was a fantastic handoff from Schneemann, who really set up that beginning of that attacking raid for the Springboks. And once the ball was worked back to the left hand side of the field, it was only a matter of time, I thought, that the Springboks were going to be able to score a try, and du Toit did that. So unfortunately for South Africa, Lebok missed the conversion of that try from Steph du Toit. So 11 points to 3 at that stage after 47 minutes of the game. And I thought South Africa was starting to get some dominance, and I thought they might start opening the play up a little bit more, and that's exactly what they did a couple of minutes later. And it was a magnificent Lebok crossfield kick pass that went to Arendse, and he went in for a try in the right hand corner of the field. A fantastic, brilliant execution from Lebok, and a very much one of the reasons why this guy's in the team. As I've been saying in my previous videos on the South African team, I really like Manny Lebok. I think he brings so much to this team. He's growing in every game. You can see him growing, and the only part that's missing from his game now, which is not of a superstar standard at this stage, is his goal kicking, and I'm sure that will come in time as he gets more and more confidence. But one of the ways to build that confidence is through what he's doing in his general play. And you know, he wasn't even looking when he kicked that ball across the field. He was looking in the opposite direction. He did a fake kick across, and Arendse was there to score a fantastic try for the Springboks. Faf de Klerk stepped up to take the conversion of that try from Arendse, and he got it over. So the Springboks had found a kicker that was going to be working for them as well. So within the space of 4 minutes, the Springboks had scored 2 tries and really changed the complexion of this game, I thought, by putting the Scottish team under a lot more pressure. Not only were they strong defensively, but now they were putting scores on the board, and that was always going to be hard for the Scottish team to come back and chase down. And we started seeing the Springboks after that become a little bit more looser and a little bit more comfortable in open play, and some of their darting runs were absolutely fantastic. So between the 50 and 53rd minute, we saw both teams changing their front rows and getting fresh legs on the field. Of course, as I said, it was 35 degrees in Marseille today for this game, and both forward packs were looking like they needed a little bit of re-energizing. So both coaches pulled the ripcord around about that 52-minute mark to allow the front rows to be freshened up. South African forwards were going to hand it back to Scotland, because when those changes were made, they won 2 big scrums in a row and got a couple of penalties. Faf de Klerk had a shot at goal from a penalty, unfortunately missed that for the Springboks, but it was at that stage that the Springbok forward pack re-emerged themselves as really putting the pressure on Scotland in this game. And it was only those 2 scrums just before half-time where I thought Scotland had any ascendancy at all in the forwards, but the South Africans dominated again as the game went on, and particularly around that 50 to 60 minute mark where we head into the second water break, they were really back onto it again. And I thought Scotland were a little bit scrappy with their lineouts as well. They overthrew a couple of lineouts. Either the caller didn't hear the call properly, or the players in the line-out weren't expecting the throw to go to where it went. So a couple of things there that Gregor Townsend and the Scottish forwards will need to work on before their next game. After the water break in the second half, we saw Finn Russell do a fantastic 50-22 kick that put the Scottish team down onto attack. And this is what I like about the Scottish team. They don't go away, and we saw it against France. We saw how they played well in the last 20 minutes, and I thought we might be able to see a bit of a resurgence from the Scottish team in the last 20 minutes. And they camped themselves down in the Springbok half for a while just after that water break and started to put on some good pressure against. Even though they had some pressure, it was the South African scrum that came to the rescue again, and they won another scrum penalty to be able to clear themselves out of that area of play. And that was something that the South Africans fairly well dominated for the rest of the game. Lebok came off at that stage, and Willie Leroux went on to play in number 10. In the 73rd minute of the game, we saw some Cheslin Colby magic. He took off down the left-hand side, beating several Scottish players. and woe and behold, it was Finn Russell that finally ankle tapped him to bring him down. But it was a great run by Colby, and just another reminder, if we needed it, how dangerous this guy can be and will be during this year's Rugby World Cup. It was a really good run from him. 74th minute, Faf de Klerk's 50th international for the South African team came to an end as Jacques Nienaber decided to sub him off, and on came Grant Williams. And if you've watched any of my videos about South Africa in the past, you'll know that I'm very excited by Grant Williams and want to see much more of him playing. And I only had to wait 2 minutes after he'd been on the field for what was the run of the day, I thought. And what a fantastic breakout he made from the South African 22, getting all the way up into the Scottish half and being tackled by, yes, you got it, Finn Russell brought him down again. So a fantastic run by Grant Williams. He showed how fast he is, but he showed also how elusive he was. And I was a little bit disappointed that he didn't have enough Springbok support around him to actually, for that phase of play, to actually lead to a try, because I think it deserved it. It was what I thought was the best run of this match by any player. So for the last 4 minutes of the game, I'd give it to Scotland. I think they finished strongly. They were down camping inside the South African half, but they couldn't find a way through the Springboks defence. And that was really the story of the game. I think it was pretty much like the game with Argentina and England yesterday. Argentina couldn't find ways through that English defence, and the South African defence was up there with that standard, even though they had 15 men on the field in this game. But it was a fantastic performance by South Africa, I thought, from a defensive line. It really didn't give Scotland an opportunity, and throughout the game Scotland were under pressure anytime they had the ball. So even though they've got a lot of talent in their backs, we didn't see a lot of Hugh Jones today. We saw Tuipulotu once, I think, make a run, and Blair Kinghorn. We saw Van der Verve doing a couple of good runs, but chopped down very quickly by the Springboks defensive line. So that was a standout feature for me today in the game, was the Springboks defence, coupled with their scrummaging, of course, and their forward power, and they were very good at the line outs as well. I think Arjish Neyman played one of the best games I've seen him play for a while. He was very good in open play today and really made an impact when he came onto the field. But again, a huge kudos, I think, to the Springboks front row of Marks, Kitsoff and Malherbe. They did the job when they needed to. Yes, Scotland won a couple of scrums and looked impressive, but overall it set up a very strong platform for the South African team. Now, as a Kiwi, don't usually give the Aussies much of a shout out, but I'm going to give Angus Gardner, the referee of today's game, a bit of a shout out, because I think he had a really good game. He was very clear in his communication to both teams. There was a bit of a scrap going on at one stage in the game, and he stepped in and he said, listen boys, no more of that, let's keep going, it's a brilliant game. And he was motivating both teams, I think, to bring out the best of them. So a good game by Angus Gardner. Nothing really controversial there today, I thought, in the game. I don't usually talk about the referees, but I think he deserves a bit of a good mention today, because I think he did a good job. So the second half score 12-3 to the Springboks, and I think Scotland will be disappointed that they didn't score any points in the second half at all. And again, kudos, I think, to the Springboks, because they got territory over the Scottish team, and their defensive line was that strong that Scotland didn't look like they were going to get through very easily to get to a try. They had a couple of opportunities where they went close to breaking the line, but there was also always another line of South African defence there, which was very impressive. So a very good win by the Springboks, I think. I think they would have gone into this game as favourites anyway, but they really delivered in their first game in the Rugby World Cup. But I also think it was a good game for Scotland. They had a tough game. If Springboks go on and win this Rugby World Cup, then Scotland are going to know that they played that #1 team in this tournament, and they pushed them pretty tight, I thought, in the first half. And it's a very good hit out, I think, for Scotland as they get ready for that big game against Ireland. That's going to be probably the test for them in this pool group. Standout players today for me on the Springbok side, none other than the legendary captain himself, Siya Kolisi. Had a great game, I thought. He carried the ball on a number of occasions. He was good in the breakdown, and he was the true leader. And as I said, that started before the two teams even ran out onto the field for today's game. Pieter-Steph du Toit playing exceptional rugby. He has been throughout the whole warm-up series, and now he's brought that form into the Rugby World Cup, scoring the try today for the Springboks as well. Really good. And it was good to see Willemse get some action in the backline today. That guy's growing on me as far as his talent. I know he's always had a lot of talent, but the more game time he gets there at fullback is really, really good for the Springboks. Inside the forwards, again, I mentioned the front row was big for South Africa. Their replacements came on and did the job as well, and I think Faf de Klerk had a really good game at halfback for the Springboks. Impressed by Manny Lebok, of course, at first 5, and his distribution. Let's get him away now and practicing his goal kicking. That's what the Springboks are going to need from him. But in Faf de Klerk, it looks like they've got a good replacement until we see Pollard at some stage in this year's Rugby World Cup. In a losing side today, Scotland, they had a few really good players. I thought Finn Russell was leading again from the front and throwing his body on the line at every opportunity. His kicking was pretty good in general play as well. I thought that 50-22 was exceptional, and yeah, he doesn't shy away from a confrontation, does Finn Russell. I thought Jack Dempsey had a good game at number 8 for Scotland today, and Gray and Gilchrist were good in the middle without having any form of domination over the Springboks, but they tried really, really hard and put themselves on the line. When Fagerson came on at the end of the game, he had a couple of good runs, as did Redpath. So there's some shining lights there for Scotland. I think their problem today was they just didn't get an opportunity and create opportunities to break down that Springboks defence. And any team that comes up against the Springboks, they're going to have to do that. We saw how they laid on that defence against the All Blacks in that warm-up game, and they've brought that mentality into this Rugby World Cup. So if you want to beat the Springboks, you're going to have to bring your best attacking innovation to try and do that, because I think it's going to take a huge effort for any team to break down the Springboks defence. So in wrapping this one up in just a few words, Springboks very, very good indeed, dominant in different parts of the field. They laid that foundation with a strong forward performance, then they paid at pace and went out wide when they had to and could, and they scored 2 tries in this game to none against Scotland. Scotland, on the other hand, I don't think they need to be too dejected by this game. I think it was a good performance. I think they just came up against a better team. And as many people have been saying, Scotland are playing very, very good rugby at the moment. Again, I reiterate, I think this game against the Springboks now was a good marker for Scotland. They're going to go away now and be able to build on this game before they play that last pool game against Ireland in this Group B of the Rugby World Cup. So there you go, that's my review of this game between the Springboks and Scotland today. Let me know what you thought of the game. Tell me what players stood out for you, and where do they go from here? Do you think Scotland have got a chance against Ireland in that last game of the pool? Of course, they've got a couple more games before they get there. Got one more game this weekend, Wales against Fiji. Going to head off and watch that right now and be doing a review of that. So if you want to watch more of my videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Join me here on Inside Rugby as I give a very fair and unbiased analysis on the Rugby World Cup. And no matter the fact that I'm a Kiwi rugby supporter and an All Black lover, there's plenty of good rugby teams here, and there's plenty of great rugby on spectacle for us at the Rugby World Cup. Don't miss any of it by staying with me here on Inside Rugby. Thanks for dropping your comments. Thanks for giving this video a thumbs up and a like. And I'll see you again really soon in the next video right here on Inside Rugby with Mark. Until then, stay well, stay safe, and keep enjoying the Rugby World Cup, everyone. Bye for now.